Karina woke up abruptly, covered in a cold sweat. It didn't take her long to realize she was at home, with Kostya beside her. Wanting to avoid his pitiful gaze and the inevitable question of whether she needed to see a doctor, she tried to slip out of the room discreetly. The memories of the last time this happened were still fresh in her mind, and they left behind a bitter residue. Just like today, she had been plagued by that recurring nightmare. It had haunted her for years, even though she never had such dreams when she was young and had just lost her parents. Now, as an adult, some would say a successful woman, that nightmare seemed to repeat itself relentlessly. Every time she woke up screaming, she used to be with Stepan, on the path to marriage. But one night, he couldn't endure it any longer. Startled awake, he didn't offer her comfort like before. Instead, he began packing his belongings into a bag. Trembling, Karina asked him, her voice filled with fear, "Stepan, what are you doing?" He glared at her with anger in his eyes. "What am I doing? I'm leaving. I can't live like this anymore. Several times a month, your abnormal screams jolt me awake. I can't handle it. I'll go crazy myself." "Will you?" Karina replied, her voice shaky. "Yes, I will, because you've been crazy for a long time and you refuse to acknowledge it. I don't want to be married to a mad woman. I don't want children born to an abnormal woman." With that, Stepan stormed out, slamming the door shut. Karina's dream, filled with collapsing buildings, exploding volcanoes, and a cloud of ash and dust enveloping fleeing people, including her parents, stopped haunting her. For an entire year, Karina had been recovering from Stepan's actions. Throughout that time, she had eagerly awaited the recurring dream, hoping it would bring her some closure. However, the dream never resurfaced. Stepan never called again, and Karina began to feel a sense of relief. Then, an unexpected opportunity came her way. She was offered a chance to change her area of work and relocate to the other side of the country, where her company was opening a new branch. Without hesitation, Karina accepted the offer. After all, what did she have to lose? Only a rented apartment. Her childhood home, where she lived happily with her parents, was located in a village nearly 100 kilometers away. A kind neighbor promised to take care of the house, but truthfully, Karina wouldn't be devastated if something were to happen to it. The pain of visiting had become unbearable, both physically and emotionally. Once, this house had been a haven for her family. It was where her grandmother, Rita, along with her parents, Mama and Papa, had created a loving home. They had purchased the house when Karina was born, as she had some health issues right from the start. The doctors had recommended moving closer to nature. Both Mama and Papa worked as lifeguards, but not the kind that rescued people from ordinary accidents. They were the ones who faced dangerous and catastrophic situations like fires, accidents, and natural disasters. Before each long, perilous business trip, Grandma would baptize them and pray for their safety. Quietly, she would shed tears when she thought Karina couldn't hear her. On one particular day, Grandma had decided to make Karina's favorite pancakes with cottage cheese. As they cooked, the television blared in the kitchen. Suddenly, Grandma froze, her gaze fixed on the news playing on the screen. Though Karina didn't fully understand what was being reported, she could sense the gravity of the situation. The TV showed footage of a volcano erupting. In that moment, the pancake being wrapped by Grandma unfolded in her hands, and the cottage cheese fell to the floor with a soft thud. That image of the fallen curds remained etched in Karina's memory, forever associating it with a profound sense of fear. Since that day, she had never touched cottage cheese again. Karina glanced anxiously at her grandmother, who sat motionless, staring at the screen with vacant eyes. The sound of the doorbell interrupted their silence, and Karina hurriedly made her way to answer it. On the doorstep stood a man dressed in the uniform her parents used to wear. Fear gripped Karina as she realized the weight of the situation. She was only 14 years old when she was left without her parents. Once the man left, an oppressive silence settled in the room, and Karina's tears began to flow quietly. She was overwhelmed with fear and grief, struggling to accept that she would never see her mom and dad again. The television screen displayed images of destruction and chaos, and Karina couldn't tear her gaze away, hoping against hope for a glimpse of her parents. But there was nothing. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed behind her, and Karina turned around in horror. Her grandmother lay unconscious on the floor, her eyes fixated on a single point. Karina was not sent to an orphanage. Instead, she was taken under the guardianship of her parents' boss and their family. She was grateful for their support and efforts to provide her with love and care. They sent her to a prestigious university and tried their best to fill the void left by her parents and grandmother. Above all, they made sure Karina did not lose herself to despair. As Karina rushed into the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of water and found a seat to catch her breath. Why now? Why did these dreams begin when she started dating someone? She pondered over this question for a while, her thoughts consumed by the past 12 years since her parents' absence. Deciding that sleep was futile at this point, she glanced at her watch. Morning would be approaching soon, so she saw no point in going back to bed. Instead, she considered making breakfast. Karina knew that Kostya always ate in the morning, unlike herself, who struggled to consume anything. However, when they met for lunch at their usual cafe, the roles reversed. Karina would enjoy a proper meal while Kostya settled for just coffee and a small sandwich. They would playfully argue about who was in the wrong, finding humor and comfort in each other's company. Karina prepared an omelet and some sandwiches before heading to wake up Kostya. However, to her surprise, he was already awake. "Hello, darling," Karina greeted him. "Hi, what are you doing up so early?" Kostya asked. Karina studied his face, wondering if he had heard her thoughts about leaving. Or was he simply making conversation? "I couldn't sleep," Kostya replied. They sat down to have breakfast together, and Karina even poured herself a cup of coffee. "How are you today?" she asked. "Karina, I'm going to my parents' house today," Kostya informed her. "Okay, well, I guess I'll finally clean out the closet," Karina replied, trying to sound nonchalant. Kostya didn't officially live with her, although he often stayed over at her place. From the outside, it seemed like both of them were content with this arrangement, but appearances can be deceiving. Karina was 26 and desired career growth, but the concept of family held significance for her. However, Kostya remained silent about any future plans. They had been together for 6 months, which she believed was enough time to evaluate their compatibility and discuss the idea of marriage. She couldn't possibly propose to him, could she? Kostya was the first to leave. Although they worked in the same company, they were in different offices and had different responsibilities. The time before lunch seemed to pass quickly and unnoticed. Karina worked diligently, even managing to squeeze in a bit of free time. However, as she headed towards the cafe, she couldn't help but wonder if Kostya had already finished his meal and left without waiting for her. As she walked briskly towards the cafe, her eyes scanned the area and immediately landed on Kostya. He was standing a short distance away from the door, engrossed in conversation with a girl. Karina approached them, hoping to join in on the conversation. "Why wasn't your crazy girl at lunch?" Kostya asked, seemingly frustrated. "She was screaming and causing a scene again today. I'm getting tired of it." Karina felt a knot forming in her stomach upon hearing Kostya's words. She took a step back, letting the realization sink in. She hurriedly turned and made her way back to the office, shocked and disheartened by what she had just heard. Later in the evening, Kostya tried to reach out to Karina, as he always did when he didn't spend the night at her place, just to bid her good night. However, this time, Karina found herself unable to answer the call. She stared at the phone as it vibrated on her desk, but chose not to pick it up. When the vibrating eventually ceased, Karina composed herself and messaged Kostya instead. I'm in a madhouse. Please don't call again, she typed, the weight of her words heavy on her heart. Kostya persisted, calling repeatedly, but Karina remained silent. Eventually, he resorted to texting her, his message filled with disdain and disbelief. "You're really crazy," the text read, a harsh reminder of the hurtful things he had said earlier. Karina deleted Kostya's number, and she immediately felt a sense of relief. Somehow, she was sure that she wouldn't have that nightmare tonight. And she was right. The next morning, Karina woke up feeling cheerful and alert. She looked at herself in the mirror and addressed her reflection, saying, "Well, time to start a new life." She went to work as if nothing had happened, talking cheerfully and smiling. She decided to skip lunch, thinking that she needed to lose a couple of extra pounds. Right after lunch, to her surprise, Kostya showed up at the office. "Karina, can we talk?" he asked. She looked at him calmly, even kindly, and replied, "About what?" "About us. What's going on?" Kostya wondered. "Kostya, I beg you. Why did you come here? You don't love me, so you shouldn't care. Did you come just because it's the right thing to do? That's foolish, don't you think? You're an educated adult, and you're succumbing to some societal convention," she explained. Kostya stood there, feeling at a loss for words. It was a blow to his ego that Karina didn't seem to care. He decided to try again. "So what about you now?" "Me?" Karina replied, confusion evident on her face. "I don't understand the question, caustic. Of course, I'm grateful that you spent 6 months with some crazy woman, but I managed to live without you for 26 years. I think I'll be just fine. Now please go, it's already working hours." Karina smiled dazzlingly at him as Kostya abruptly turned around and headed for the door. The girl saw him off and then leaned over her papers, wondering, and what was that all about? The voice that suddenly sounded right beside her ear startled Karina. "Svetka, how many times do I have to tell you not to sneak up on me like a cat? You'll give me a heart attack," Karina exclaimed, half-jokingly. Svetka, her part-time friend, grinned mischievously. "Karinka, really? Did you break up with Kostik? Where are the tears? He's so handsome," Svetka teased, mimicking her earlier remarks when Karina had just started dating Kostik. For some reason, Svetka had immediately taken a strong dislike to him, calling him a pompous idiot. She even refused to come to Karina's place if Kostik was around. Karina couldn't fathom why Svetka had such an aversion to him. "Svet, you're my friend, right?" Karina asked, hoping for an explanation. "Of course I'm your friend, who welcomed you, took you in, and kept you warm." Svetka chuckled, recalling the time when Karina had moved to this cold, unwelcoming city and found herself lost. Svetka had come to her rescue, picking her up in a taxi provided by the office. From that moment on, they had formed a close bond, with Svetka becoming Karina's guiding light in this new city. Karina paused, gathering her thoughts. "And why does it bother you so much? Why can't you stand my boyfriend?" she finally asked. Svetka stopped abruptly, her hands dropping to her sides. "Because your boyfriend shouldn't be your boyfriend, Karina. He's not right for you. He only loves himself," Svetka revealed, her frustration evident. Her friend's anger had reached such heights that Karina had to step in to calm her down. Sveta was known for being impulsive and sincere, always speaking her mind. While this trait earned her respect at work, it also made her a target for those who disliked her. Karina knew that Sveta was originally from the outskirts of the city, but her parents had bought her a one-bedroom apartment in the city due to concerns about her driving in the winter darkness. Now, as Sveta stood before her, towering like a kite, Karina wondered what she could possibly say to her. Should she admit that Sveta was right, but there was no time to explain everything now. "Svetka, go to work. Afterward, we can celebrate with a bottle of champagne, and I promise to fill you in on everything," Karina suggested. Later that evening, once Sveta had learned all the details, she looked at Karina thoughtfully. "Do you have time off?" she asked. "Yes, I have some," Karina replied. However, a sense of dread washed over her. She realized that Sveta was up to something extraordinary again, and with her time off, she wouldn't be able to escape. Sveta, I'm not going anywhere. Last time, we nearly drowned because you insisted that those who haven't gone kayaking haven't truly lived. Karina recollected the weekend with a shudder as Sveta convinced her to try this adventure. If it hadn't been for Karina's athleticism, they wouldn't have made it out and would have struggled to survive. Karina had not only had to hold onto a log to stay afloat herself, but had also needed to support Sveta, who was a poor swimmer. The urge to scold her friend for the reckless decision had been overwhelming. Well, we didn't die, did we? Everything turned out fine. What an adventure! You'll never forget it, Sveta exclaimed, smiling. That was definitely a memory Karina couldn't forget. As she looked into Sveta's eyes, she saw that familiar spark once again. Come on, no need to freak out. I'm not forcing you to do anything, Karina reassured Sveta. Let's just go to my grandmother's place. She lives by a serene lake, surrounded by a beautiful forest. There won't be a single person in sight, Karina suggested. Doesn't she live with her parents? Sveta asked. No, actually. She's not even my grandmother, but my great-grandmother. I have no idea how old she is, but we should definitely visit her. She's a witch or something. That's why she chose to live in seclusion, Karina explained. Sveta burst into laughter. A witch? Really? Karina, you must be joking. Karina smirked. Well, Sveta, who knows? Maybe you won't recognize her at first glance. Shall we go? Realizing Karina was serious, Sveta replied, All right, if she has a microwave, why not? But watch out, Karina. If anything strange happens, I'm out of there. Karina felt grateful to Sveta. Though she tried to be strong, there was still a lingering resentment in her soul. Was it really her fault that she experienced nightmares? Why did she have to be treated differently? Did it mean she would always end up alone because of her nightmares? Sveta, maybe I should see a doctor. They could prescribe some medication, right? Karina suggested. Sveta responded, You should send your boyfriends to the doctor instead. They're the ones who need help, always leaving and running away. Men, Karina couldn't help but chuckle. Karina and her friend agreed on something, so she decided to save her thoughts about doctors for later. They had been walking for an hour, following a meandering path between the trees. Sveta, you said you knew a shortcut. I've been here before. Damn, I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. Well, turn on the navigation on your phone. You must have a navigation app, right? Karina, what the hell is a navigation app? There's never been any signal here. You're such a great friend. You should have taken the main road. We should have, but there's no point discussing it now. It's all overgrown. I have no idea where to turn. We'll have to walk. No way, I'm not walking. Who knows, there might be wolves around here. The local wolves are waiting for you, ready to skin you alive and leave you with nothing to eat. Sveta turned the wheel and accidentally hit the car's nose against a tree. Well, that's it. Now we're definitely stuck here. Sveta and Karina stepped out of the car. They walked around it, stopped, and walked around it again. Sveta bit her fingernail thoughtfully. Well, I suppose if we go back a little and then turn here, and maybe go back again. Sveta, come on, think of something. Why is it that every time you take charge, the simplest thing turns into an adventure, and most of the time, not a safe one? Karina, why are you always yelling like that? I know this area like the back of my hand. Oh, really? Then show us the way and, more importantly, how to get there. Just as Sveta was about to respond, they heard a loud crunch. It was the sound of a broken branch, and if it broke, someone else had broken it. Like a bear, the girls squealed and quickly got back into the car. A shadow fell on the windshield, causing them to shut their eyes tightly. They heard a cautious knock. Strange, a bear would knock. The knocking repeated. Karina cautiously opened one eye and saw a man looking at them mockingly through the glass. "Ladies, are you lost?" Svetka searched and searched until she finally spotted Igor. Excitedly, she called out, "Igor, we need your help." She hopped out of the car and wrapped her arms around his neck. Igor chuckled and teased, "Svetka, you're all grown up now, but still throwing yourself at everyone." "But you're not just anyone," Svetka insisted. "Meet Karina, my childhood friend and best companion. We used to steal apples and strawberries from Grandma Efimovna's garden when we were kids." Igor took Karina's hand and grinned. "Don't believe her. She was the thief. I was simply her lookout. She used to run off and cry while I kept watch around the corner." Svetka laughed heartily. "Igor, what are you doing here in the forest?" Igor replied, "I could ask you the same question. We were here first. We came to see Grandma Semyonovna and check how she's doing," Svetka explained with a sigh. "We thought we knew a shortcut, but we ended up getting lost." "Svet, when was the last time you drove through these woods?" Igor asked, raising an eyebrow. I don't remember," she admitted. "Maybe about 3 years ago." Igor shook his head in disbelief. "I see. Let me see what you've gotten yourself into." He positioned himself in front of the car, and Karina couldn't help but admire his strength. He didn't try to impress anyone or show off. He was simply a dependable and sturdy presence. Karina noticed a belt with ammunition, resembling what hunters wear, and spotted a gun leaning against a nearby tree. "Do you have the keys to the car?" Igor asked. Svetka nodded and handed him the keys. Igor confidently got behind the wheel and skillfully maneuvered the car through the forest. After a short while, they arrived at a spacious clearing, with a forest on one side and a beautiful lake on the other. Karina couldn't help but gasp in awe. The place resembled an illustration from a fairy tale in a children's book. She stepped out of the car and admired the breathtaking sight before her. Igor gently guided her towards the lake and urged her to look. With a loud clap of his hands, swans gracefully emerged from the grassy area below, taking flight into the sky. Karina was frozen in awe. "That doesn't happen," she muttered, unable to believe her eyes. "It happens. We have even more incredible things here," Igor replied, turning to face her. He then pointed to someone approaching them. "And there's Semyonovna." Karina and Igor looked in the direction he was indicating. It was their grandmother, unmistakably so. She wore a light-colored kerchief, a blue apron, and a long skirt. It was hard to tell her age, somewhere between 70 and 90. "Svetovka, why did you take so long? I sent Igor to find you," their grandmother exclaimed as she hugged her granddaughter. Sveta pulled away for a moment, surprised. "Grandma, how did you know we were coming?" "Well, my child, wouldn't I feel that my family is coming?" Their grandmother replied with a playful laugh. "I'm Agrippina Semyonovna, and what is your name?" "I'm Karina," Karina introduced herself. "That's good. Let's hurry inside. The pies are getting cold," their grandmother said, eager to get going. Svetka jumped up in excitement. "My favorite pies with duck." The old woman smiled warmly. "Of course, your favorite. Thank Yegor for the duck. As soon as he heard you were coming, he brought the fattest one." Sveta glanced mischievously at Yegor and asked, "Yegor, when did you find out I was coming?" Yegor shrugged his shoulders and replied, "Semyonovna mentioned it at lunch the day before yesterday. Funny, we only decided to come in the evening. Grandma, they might mistake you for a witch and burn you at the stake," Sveta chuckled. Grandma laughed and said, "Who needs me, old?" Karina loved being in this peaceful and beautiful place. In the evening, she and Sveta went to the lake. Karina asked, "Sveta, who is Yegor? Does he live around here?" Sveta explained, "He used to live here when we were kids. We were good friends, but they moved away when I was 10 and he was 15. Now he's back, but I don't know why or for how long. He's coming tomorrow and promised to make kebabs. I'll ask him everything then." Why do you want to know? Karina blushed and replied, just curious, that's all. Sveta teased, wait a minute, what's going on? Do you like him? Karina pushed Sveta away, annoyed, and said, Sveta, stop it. Why are you acting like a child? Sveta persisted, Karina, it's love at first sight. Karina dismissed the idea, saying, oh, come on, you're talking nonsense. Sveta playfully added, you know, for once, I actually approve of your choice, especially since he seems to be interested in you too. Karina shook her head, dismissing Sveta's words. The 5 days off went by quickly. Karina realized that meeting Igor had left a lasting impression on her. She realized that she had met a real man, someone any woman could dream of. However, Igor did not make any moves towards her, even though Karina was sure he liked her. He joked, cooked kebabs for them, and even took them fishing. Karina made a solemn vow that if someone could figure out how to get rid of all the mosquitoes, she would give them all her salary for the rest of her life. Yegor bid his farewell on the final day, stating that he had depleted his vacation days and would be leaving that night. He assured Karina that they would definitely see each other again. As he disappeared into the forest, Karina turned to her grandmother, meeting her gaze, which seemed to penetrate her. Her grandmother spoke, suggesting they go and have a chat over tea. Svetka, wanting to join them, was stopped by her grandmother. Granddaughter, please don't take offense, her grandmother began, but we need to talk one-on-one. Isn't that why you brought your friend here? Yes, Grandma, Karina responded. I'll go for a walk by the lake. Curiosity and fear mixed in Karina's mind as Svetka seemed to have her grandmother's full attention. The old woman prepared tea, setting the stage for their conversation. Tell me, what troubles you? Her grandmother gently inquired. It's not much, replied Karina. I often have dreams, nightmares really, of my parents' death. It happens whenever I start dating someone, or even when I get married. I scream and wake up, and everyone thinks I'm crazy. Her grandmother listened intently, then asked, but when the person you're dating isn't around, do you dream about them? No, never, Karina answered. Do you think it's my parents trying to tell me something? That this person isn't right for me? Her grandmother shook her head. No, it's not your parents. It's you telling yourself. Subconsciously, you know that you don't want this person, but you don't know how to express it. So you create this fairy tale in your mind. And at night, when the conscious mind rests, the soul takes over. It tries to push away the one you don't want. Don't worry, my child. You'll find someone you truly love and marry faster than you think. You won't scream in your sleep because you will love your husband. As Karina listened to her grandmother's words, exhaustion washed over her, causing her eyelids to droop. Go to sleep, child, her grandmother gently urged. See what you dream about. Take a good look. Karina was abruptly awakened, finding herself back in reality with her grandmother sitting at the table. Oh, how did I fall asleep? She mumbled. Curious, her grandmother asked, Karina, who did you meet in your dream? A sense of happiness and nostalgia enveloped Karina as she replied, You can't imagine. I was talking to my grandmother. It felt so wonderful to see her again, just as she used to be. And who else? Her grandmother inquired. Our neighbor, Karina recalled. I didn't know him well. I was still a child when he passed away. What about others? Her grandmother pressed. Granny Sonia, Karina remembered. She lived across the street and passed away shortly after my grandmother. Her grandmother's normally light blue eyes turned dark as she asked, Anything else? I don't remember, Karina admitted. I don't think there was anyone else. Curious, her grandmother asked, What did your grandmother say to you? She seemed angry, Karina recalled. She told me to go home because my parents were worried. And what did you say? Her grandmother questioned. I don't remember, Karina admitted. Her grandmother nodded approvingly. That's good. Suddenly, the old woman seemed to return to her usual self. Listen to me, Karina, she spoke with a serious tone. I am rarely mistaken, but I fear I may be now. You have seen everyone who has passed away, everyone you knew. But your parents haven't come to see you. Confused, Karina asked, "Why haven't they?" "I don't believe they are among the dead," her grandmother explained. "But I don't see them among the living either. There is no connection between you. They are not dead, and if they are alive, they don't know you." Baffled, Karina questioned, "How is that possible?" "It's something I cannot say for certain," her grandmother admitted. "I have shared with you everything I know." The conversation lingered in Karina's mind as she went about her day. On her first day at the cafe, she unexpectedly bumped into Kostya. "Karen, let's have a conversation. Where have you been? I left without saying anything and it could have offended me." Kostya looked at her playfully, and Karina realized that her great mood after the trip quickly faded away. How could she have thought she loved this sweet man? "Kostya, there's nothing left to talk about between you and me. We made a mistake in thinking we could make something work. Karina, my patience is not unlimited. I'm warning you, I may take offense. Seriously, if that makes sense to you." Karina wanted to punch that arrogant jerk. She smiled, remembering Svetka's description. "Kostya, stay away from me for good. Is that clearer for you?" She walked away, leaving Kostya staring after her. What was wrong with her? So bold, so different from how she used to be. He had always been annoyed by the overly clingy types. Maybe they should try again. Okay, he had work to do now. But after work, he would fix things with her. Karina couldn't concentrate on her work. Her mind was occupied with what the old lady had told her. By the end of the day, she had made up her mind. Her boss noticed her and said, "No more time off, and even if there is, don't bother asking." Karina sat down across from him. "I really need it. I truly do. Otherwise, I'll have to quit." "Karina, what's going on with you? Where are you going?" "I need to go home. Something has come up. I can't explain it properly, but it's about my parents." "All right, will 1 week be enough? You're the best boss in the world." Karina rushed down the stairs. She had already booked her plane ticket. She needed to quickly drop off her things and head to the airport. Karina. "Kostya, what now? We need to talk. I'm begging you, not now. Actually, never." Kostya grabbed her arm. "You're going through a difficult time right now, which is why you may be feeling lost. But please know that I forgive you. Please leave me alone." She tried to free her hand, but Kostya held it tightly, causing her pain. "Let go of the girl." Karina immediately recognized that voice. Startled, Kostya released his grip, and Karina rushed into Igor's arms. "That's right. You men don't think." Quickly finding a replacement, Kostya wanted to add something offensive, but stopped himself when he saw Igor's fist. "Igor, I only have 2 hours, then I have to catch a flight." "A flight? Where to? It's a long story." Igor opened the car door for her. "Sit down and tell me the address, then I'll listen to you." She told him everything, starting from the news that had aired on TV years ago. Igor drove her to the airport, and there, he kissed her and said, "I'll be waiting, but if you need my help, call me right away. I'll come over." Karina nestled against him. "Just wait for me, okay?" He chuckled. "Of course, I've waited for 30 years. A few days won't make a difference." The girl walked slowly down the street. This was where she went to school, and there, her grandmother used to turn when she went to the market on Saturdays. Sometimes, she would take Karina along, as there was a lot to buy. The girl despised these trips. On Saturdays, she just wanted to sleep, not go to the market in the morning. Now, just 2 more houses, a turn, and she would see her house. It's probably in ruins by now. Not from old age, but from vandals. Children like to break glass. People discard whatever is lying around. "Karina, are you there?" She stopped abruptly as an old woman wearing a hat stood before her. Astonished, she realized it was the neighbor who was supposed to be watching the house. "I'm Aunt Galia. Hello," the old woman greeted her. Suddenly, the neighbor burst into tears. At last, she cried out. Confused, she asked, "Who told you?" "They're going crazy, searching all the neighboring towns." Aunt Galia fell silent, her eyes widening. Karenavka, don't you know anything? She whispered. Filled with anxiety, Karina began to shout. What don't I know? Aunt Galia, tell me. But the neighbor remained speechless, only managing to utter, Run, Karenavka, run home. A sudden realization struck Karina. She didn't expect her parents to be waiting for her at home. Or did she? Hastily, she picked up her pace and started running, clumsily dragging her suitcase behind her. Finally, she reached the house. However, something seemed different. The house no longer appeared abandoned. The windows were clean and adorned with flowers. Could she have found some long-lost relatives? Surely, she must have had more family members than a single grandmother. It was a good sign. If Aunt Galia mentioned that they were looking for her, they would surely be thrilled to see her, and Karina would be overjoyed as well. It was difficult living with the knowledge that she was alone in the world. Approaching the gate, she noticed a woman sitting in the gazebo her father had built for her. Who could it be? Perhaps a relative or maybe a stranger who had bought the house after it had been empty for so long. Her heart skipped a beat when she noticed the striking resemblance between the woman and her mother. Could she be a sister? Why not? Karina often watched melodramas, and they always seemed to end with the reveal of a long-lost family member. Trying to suppress a cough, Karina's gaze caught the woman turning her head as if listening. Then it dawned on her the woman was blind. Not only that, but she recognized her too. Mommy! Karina's scream pierced the air, causing birds to scatter from the surrounding trees. With a slow and uncertain movement, the woman rose to her feet. Her gaze fell on Karina, then shifted past her. Karina? Karenavka? She called out, her voice filled with disbelief. Without hesitation, the girl rushed towards her, grasping her tightly, embracing her with all her might. Sobs racked Karina's body, making it difficult for her to comprehend what she was saying. Over and over again, she repeated, Mommy, Mommy, Mommy. The woman gently kissed Karina's hair, whispering, My daughter, my daughter. Then, someone else scooped Karina up into their arms. Doka, they exclaimed. The word hit Karina like a final blow. Daddy, she murmured, her consciousness beginning to fade away. Late that night, as they sat at the table, Karina woke up, thinking it was all just another dream. The details of how it all unfolded were too painful to describe. As the emotions settled down and they clasped hands, Karina's father began to speak. 12 years ago, we found ourselves in a similar situation. However, our mission then was slightly different. In the end, we were left behind, abandoned by those who sent us, deemed unnecessary and even dangerous. For 5 years, we roamed without any identification, fearing that if we reached out to people, they might help us, but at the cost of our lives. And when my mother started losing her vision due to the trauma she had endured, we had no choice but to leave the mountains. Karina's father sighed before continuing. We ended up in jail. Yes, we committed a crime according to the laws of this country, though it was for the sake of our own nation. But that's all in the past. 6 months ago, we were replaced by other individuals who had committed similar crimes in our homeland. Things have taken a turn around here. It's not the same anymore. My mom has already had surgery and the doctors are hopeful. We were searching for you, but in a normal way, like regular people. They advised us to forget about everything that happened before. It was just yesterday morning when I discovered the location of your town. I didn't have your phone number or exact address, but my mom and I made the decision to go. It would have been impossible for us to find you from here. We've already purchased the tickets. And as for you, how is it possible? You haven't been here in 10 years. You left no indications for anyone to find you. It was difficult for me. I didn't want to. I couldn't. I sent money to Uncle Kolia to take care of my grandmother's grave. But your graves were not there. I wouldn't have returned. But then I had a dream. My grandmother appeared. It was a comforting dream. All the people I knew who had already passed away were present, but you were not among them. she conveyed that you are not among the deceased. Daughter, I don't know if I will ever see you again, but I am certain that you are the most beautiful. Her mother tenderly caressed Karina's hand. And her father promptly added, Mother, don't doubt it for a second. They retired to bed in the morning, Karina in her own room, and her parents in theirs. Everything remained the same as before, as it was years ago. Karina texted her friend, My parents are alive. I will talk to you later. She immediately turned off her phone, well aware of Svetka's nature. In the morning, she was awakened by voices and the clattering of dishes in the kitchen. Karina stretched and thanked God. She had never felt so content. She picked up her phone and turned it on. Multiple texts awaited her. Svetka had called 34 times. The only text she received said, Igor is following you. Karina jolted awake on the bed, startled by a familiar voice coming from the kitchen. Before she could react, Igor entered the room with a sandwich in hand, casually chewing on it. Come on, sleepyhead, Igor teased. Get up before we eat all the sandwiches. For some reason, Karina started crying, catching Igor off guard. Why are you crying? He asked with concern. Karina's father's voice came from behind Igor, offering an explanation. Igor, don't worry. Women are complicated creatures. They cry when things are bad or when they're happy. Can you ever understand what's going on in their heads? Svetka, Karina's mother, chimed in, taking charge. Igor, why are you stomping around like a bear? Bring the salad and make sure you don't drop it. Igor defended himself. Sveta, when have I ever dropped anything? Svetka responded, Well, everyone has to start somewhere. Frustrated, Igor exclaimed, Sometimes I feel like slapping you. Svetka retorted, Oh, you've been threatening that since you were a kid. Mama, Papa, and the godmother are arguing again. A little girl approached Karina and tattled excitedly. Igor turned around and playfully called out, And Marinka, Kalinka, Tattletale. Mama? Karina hugged the little girl and teasingly showed Igor a fist. No, of course not. Daddy's just joking, she assured their daughter. They're coming, Karina exclaimed as a car approached their house. Her father had just picked up her mother from the hospital after her last operation, and he had shouted on the phone that everything went well. Igor scooped up Marina, forgetting their little quarrel, and held her tightly, helping Karina to her feet. With an expectant gaze, Karina watched her mother step out of the car. Her mother looked around, touched something, and then caught sight of Karina in the window. There was a momentary pause in her mother's gaze, which then shifted to scan Karina's face and figure. Finally, her mother smiled and said, My daughter, I always knew you were beautiful.